I saw my mom holding hands with another man, so I confronted her and said I'd tell my dad, but her response shocked me. Hello Reddit, I never thought I'd be the one posting here. I've read so many stories on the subreddit thinking, wow, I can't imagine that happening to me, but here I am, caught in the middle of something I still can't fully process. I'm not looking for sympathy. I just need to get this off my chest, and maybe someone out there can help me make sense of it all. For some context, I'm 27, and my parents have been married for 30 years. To everyone who knows them, they're the perfect couple. They've been through so much together. Career struggles, health scares, financial ups and downs, but they've always come out the other side stronger. My mom has always been the heart of our family. She's the kind of woman who remembers everyone's birthday, insists on Sunday dinners, and sends good morning texts with little heart emojis. I've always admired her, not just as a mother, but as a person. So, to say this whole thing has shaken me is an understatement. It started a couple of weeks ago on a random Thursday. I'd taken the day off work to run errands and decided to treat myself to coffee at this little cafe downtown. It's one of those cozy places with soft jazz playing and the smell of fresh pastries filling the air. I was sipping my latte by the window when I noticed someone who looked exactly like my mom across the street. At first, I thought, no way, that's just someone who looks like her. But then she turned, and my stomach dropped. It was her. I was about to wave and call out, thinking it was a funny coincidence, when I noticed she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, someone I didn't recognize. They were standing close, talking, and then she reached out and took his hand. Not a friendly handshake or a quick supportive grab, this was intimate. The kind of hand-holding you see between people who are together. I froze. My brain scrambled for explanations. Maybe it's an old friend, someone comforting her about something? Maybe it's a misunderstanding. But then he leaned in, said something that made her laugh, and she squeezed his hand tighter. I sat there, completely stunned, my heart pounding so hard I thought people around me could hear it. Part of me wanted to burst out the door and confront her right then and there, but another part, the rational part, told me to wait. Maybe there's a reason for this. Maybe I'm jumping to conclusions. But as I watched them walk down the street hand in hand, disappearing around the corner, I felt something twist in my gut that wouldn't let go. I spent the next few hours in a daze. I didn't even remember driving home. I kept replaying the scene in my head, analyzing every detail, her smile, the way she looked at him, how natural it seemed. What does this mean? Is she cheating? The word felt foreign and heavy. My mom would never do something like that, would she? That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my dad, how he still leaves little notes in her lunch, how he brags about her cooking to anyone who'll listen, how he calls her his girl even after all these years. The thought of him being betrayed like this made me feel sick. By morning, I knew I couldn't just let it slide. I needed answers. So, I decided to confront her. Not over the phone, not in public. I wanted to look her in the eyes. I texted her, asking if we could grab lunch. She replied instantly with a cheerful, "Of course, sweetie. Everything okay?" God, the guilt that hit me then, but I pushed it aside. I needed the truth. We met at a quiet restaurant a few blocks from my apartment. She arrived looking like her usual self, smiling, warm, wearing that necklace Dad gave her for their anniversary. It felt surreal. How can she look so normal after what I saw? I tried to make small talk, but I must have been awful at hiding my nerves because she tilted her head and asked, "Honey, what's on your mind?" I didn't want to blurt it out in the middle of the restaurant, so I suggested we take a walk afterward. She agreed, grabbing her coat. My palms were sweaty, and my heart was racing the whole time. Finally, when we reached a quiet stretch of the park, I stopped walking. She turned to me, concerned. "Sweetheart, you're scaring me." "What is it?" I took a deep breath, every part of me screaming not to do this, but I had to. "I saw you yesterday," I said, my voice shaking. "Downtown, with a man. You were holding his hand." Her face changed instantly. Not anger, not denial, but something else, something I couldn't place. There was a long, unbearable silence before she spoke, her voice soft. "I was hoping you wouldn't find out like this." That's when everything shifted. The ground felt like it was crumbling beneath me. What was she talking about? What did she mean she was hoping I wouldn't find out? I felt tears pricking my eyes, a mix of betrayal, confusion, and dread swirling inside me. I clenched my fists. I'm going to tell Dad, I said, my voice breaking. He deserves to know. And then, she said something I never expected. Something that would flip my world upside down. But I'll get to that. I stood there, heart pounding, my words still hanging in the cold air. I'm going to tell Dad. I expected her to panic or beg me not to. Maybe deny everything or get defensive. But what she did next made my blood run cold. She smiled. Not a smug smile, not even a guilty one. It was this sad, knowing expression, like she'd been carrying a weight for so long that she was relieved it was finally out. Sweetheart, she said quietly, it's not what you think. Not what I think. Really? I wanted to scream. I'd seen her laughing, holding another man's hand like they were in some romantic movie. How could she stand there and act like this was something I'd misunderstood? My chest tightened, anger bubbling beneath the confusion. Then what is it, Mom? Because from where I stood, it looked a hell of a lot like you were cheating on Dad. Her face twisted at the word cheating, and she glanced around like someone might overhear us, even though we were alone. Her hands trembled as she reached for mine, but I took a step back. I didn't want comfort. I wanted answers. Let's not do this here, she said. Come to my car. Please. Every instinct told me to walk away, to cool off, but curiosity gnawed at me like a splinter I couldn't ignore. Reluctantly, I followed her to the parking lot. Once we were inside her car, doors shut, she let out a breath that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 secrets. His name is Daniel, she began, voice barely above a whisper. I've known him since before I met your father. That threw me. Before Dad? I blinked, trying to piece it together. Okay, so he's an old friend? But even as I said it, my gut told me it wasn't that simple. She shook her head slowly. Not just a friend. Her eyes flicked to mine, shimmering with something that looked like guilt and something else. Regret? Nostalgia? He was my first love. My jaw dropped. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, but none came. This was real. My mom had a whole love story before Dad? I mean, sure, people have pasts. But this? This man she was holding hands with wasn't just some old flame. She was clearly still connected to him. Why now? I croaked. Why meet up with him after all these years? And why in secret? Her hands fidgeted with her keys, metal jingling softly. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Daniel reached out a few months ago. He found me through an old friend. Said he was in town, wanted to catch up. I thought I could handle it. That it would just be coffee, reminiscing about the past. Her voice broke. But seeing him again stirred up things I thought were long gone. I sat back, my mind racing. This felt like something out of a bad soap opera. Long-lost love reappears, stirring old feelings. Except this was my family. My parents, who I thought were rock solid. Do you love him? The question slipped out before I could stop it. I wasn't even sure I wanted the answer. Tears welled in her eyes. I love your father, she said firmly. Then, softer, but Daniel was a big part of my life once. Feelings, they're complicated. Complicated? This was betrayal, not complicated. My mind flicked to Dad, how he still kissed her forehead every morning, how he always saved the last piece of cake for her, how he looked at her like she hung the moon. And she was here, reminiscing with some guy from her past? I clenched my fists. Does Dad know? She hesitated. That was answer enough. Mom. I exploded. How could you do this? He trusts you. We all do. It's not like that, she cried. I didn't plan for any of this. It just happened. I wasn't looking for it, but when I saw Daniel, she stopped herself, covering her face with her hands. God, I never wanted to hurt anyone. Silence stretched between us, thick with things unsaid. Part of me wanted to believe her, that this was just a mistake, an emotional slip. But the image of them holding hands, her laughing with him, wouldn't stop replaying in my mind. So what now? I asked. Are you going to keep seeing him? Her shoulders sagged. No. I told him today was goodbye. That's why we were meeting. To end it. She looked at me desperately. I know how it looked, but I swear to you, that's what it was. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But a nagging voice in my head whispered, if it was really over, why did she look so heartbroken? I pressed my fingers to my temples, a headache blooming. I still think Dad deserves to know. Her face crumpled. Please, honey. Let me be the one to tell him on my terms. I need time. Just give me that. My heart twisted. This wasn't just my mom. It was the woman who'd bandaged my scraped knees, stayed up with me through heartbreaks, celebrated every little success. But this? This betrayal? How was I supposed to carry the secret? I swallowed hard. You have a week, I said finally. If you don't tell him by then. I will. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. But as I got out of the car and watched her drive away, a cold dread settled in my chest. Something didn't sit right. If it was truly goodbye, why did her words feel like a half-truth? And why was my gut screaming that there was more to this story? I went home that night, tossing and turning in bed, questions swirling like a storm. Who exactly was Daniel? Why now? And was Mom really telling me everything? I didn't know it then, but the real shock was yet to come. And trust me, Reddit, what I found out next blew everything apart. The days following our conversation felt like a blur. Every time I looked at my dad, I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of the secret. He'd hum while making his morning coffee, kiss my mom on the cheek before heading to work, and talk about weekend plans like nothing was wrong. He had no idea. I hated it. I hated her for putting me in this position, and I hated myself for agreeing to give her time. I counted down the days, 7, 6, 5, each one stretching longer than the last. I tried to distract myself, but my mind kept circling back to Daniel. Who was this man who'd reappeared like a ghost from the past? And why had my mom looked so torn? Then, on day 3, curiosity got the better of me. I needed answers. I found Daniel's name on the hospital visitor log my mom mentioned, a quick online search later, and there he was. His social media was sparse, but revealed enough. A few photos of him hiking, a couple of work events, and one post that made my stomach drop. A picture of him and my mom from years ago, arms around each other, smiling. The caption? Some people leave a mark on your heart forever. It was posted just 2 months ago. So much for just catching up. By day 6, I was on edge. Mom had said she'd tell Dad, but every time I saw them together, nothing seemed different. No tension. No sign of any difficult conversations. Had she lied? Was she hoping I'd just forget? That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I texted her, "Did you tell him?" No response. My patience snapped. I grabbed my keys and drove to my parents' house, heart pounding. Mom opened the door, surprise flashing across her face. "Honey, what did you tell him?" I cut her off. "Because if you didn't, I will. Right now." Her face paled. "Please, just no more excuses, Mom." I snapped. He deserves the truth. That's when Dad appeared behind her, wiping his hands with a dish towel. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us. My chest tightened. "Dad, there's something you need to know." Mom's eyes filled with panic, but I barreled on. "I saw Mom with another man. Holding hands. She said it was her ex, Daniel." "I thought you should know." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's expression didn't morph into shock or betrayal like I expected. Instead, he sighed. "I know," he said softly. I blinked. "What?" Mom covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Dad gently rubbed her back. "I've known for a while," he continued. "Your mom told me as soon as Daniel reached out." What the hell? My mind reeled. "You knew? And you're okay with this?" Dad gave me a sad smile. "It's complicated. Daniel was a huge part of your mom's life before me. When he reached out, she was honest with me from the start. I told her I trusted her to handle it." I stared at them, struggling to process. "But I saw them holding hands. She was laughing. How is that okay?" Mom finally spoke, voice thick with emotion. Daniel was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He doesn't have long. He wanted to see me, not to rekindle anything, but to say goodbye. I was comforting him. That's all it was. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Cancer. Goodbye. Oh my God. Why didn't you just tell me that? I whispered. Mom wiped her eyes. I didn't want to burden you. I thought I could handle it quietly. I never expected you to see us, or get caught in the middle. Guilt flooded me, twisting in my chest. I jumped to the worst conclusions. I thought she was betraying my dad, betraying us. But she was saying goodbye to someone who once mattered deeply to her, someone facing the end. Dad squeezed my shoulder. Love isn't black and white, kiddo. Sometimes it's messy. But your mom's heart has always been with this family. I swallowed the lump in my throat, nodding slowly. I just didn't want you to get hurt, I mumbled. I know, he said, pulling me into a hug. But you don't always have to protect me. We're in this together. As I drove home later, my mind spun with everything that had happened. I'd been so sure of the worst, so ready to expose a betrayal that wasn't what it seemed. Yes, seeing them had hurt, but I realized sometimes things aren't as simple as they look. Love, grief, old connections, they tangle in ways that defy easy labels. Was it strange that my mom had held Daniel's hand? Maybe. But was it unforgivable? No. In the end, it wasn't about romance. It was about closure. About saying goodbye to a part of her past so she could fully embrace the present. If there's one thing I've learned from this, it's that relationships are rarely clear-cut. People carry histories, emotions, scars, and sometimes, what looks like betrayal is just a complicated form of love. Would I have handled it differently? Probably. But in the end, my family wasn't falling apart. We were just human. Flawed, messy, and at the core of it all, trying to do right by each other. And that's all you can really hope for, isn't it?